This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den.
And welcome into episode number 146 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. Nick Maxon joining myself, Noah Grant, for another Sunday here in January. And Nick, we have a ton to talk about this week. I mean, it's weird. There's just some weeks where, you're almost trying to buy a storyline. I think about like the middle of the summer sometimes. And then there's other weeks like this week where you're like, what can we offload into the following week? It's just been that crazy. To start the show, we're going to obviously talk about the Ivan Provorov stuff. Bruce Boudreau is going to be in there as well, too. The Canucks doing Canuck things. And I feel bad for the guy. So we're going to touch on that. Some really key injuries, some bankruptcy that we're going to talk about. And that's the open to the show, people. We're not even going to get to the main portion of the show till obviously a little bit later. We'll cruise through men's hockey roundup in the NCAA, a bit more subdued week, all things considered, but that's not saying much this year. Then the NCHC, St. Cloud did exactly what they had to do on the men's side. So we'll talk about that and implications related to the pairwise there. And then the women had a good showing yesterday against Ohio State, picked up a crucial point as they move forward into next weekend, obviously. So we'll touch on them. And then the Minnesota Wild had a...
not great.
Not great week, especially compared to those around them, all things considered. So we'll talk about them. And then our extra ice session, you're not going to want to miss this one. We have a trio of topics that I think are going to be really interesting. First, St. Thomas, of course, their new arena. We're going to talk about that. And really, where does the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center rank in the NCHC? And kind of talking about what the future is like for St. Cloud there. And really the NCHC in general. A really interesting article coming out of Miami and the Redhawks talking about Arizona State and changes potentially to the league as well. So we're going to talk about all of that. It's going to be a pretty juicy extra ice session, I think, as well, too. So before we get there, we start, as always, with the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup and Center Ice View News and Notes.
Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
So let's get into the fun stuff, right? So I think we need to start with the Ivan Provorov situation. So for those who may have missed it, I don't know how you would if you're a hockey fan, but essentially Ivan Provorov, defenseman for the Philadelphia Flyers, did not essentially partake in warm-ups. And essentially, why did he do that? Well, it was Pride Night for Philadelphia, and the players were wearing a commemorative Pride Night warm-ups jersey that he did not want to participate in.
Beautiful jersey, by the way.
Yeah.
Black jersey with the rainbow colored numbers. Like, I thought, regardless of the whole Pride Night, piece of it, which, I'm all for it, that sort of thing. I'm nothing against that. Like, I would wear that anyway. Like, I think it's that cool. Like, it's not rare for me to say in general that I would want a rainbow as part of my attire. And they looked that good. They looked really clean, I thought.
So let's just say that people picked up on Provorov not skating in warm-ups, and he was asked about it, and essentially gave a religious reason. And he's been taking a lot of flack for it, for lack of a better term. Noah. So
yeah, he's Russian Orthodox, which his statement essentially was talking about how, I respect people's choices. And then John Tortorella kind of backed up and said, the organization has released a statement, we're not going to, punish him. We didn't think about sitting him for the game, that sort of thing. And we kind of talked about how this is a really rare situation, because the only other time that I could think that this would happen where you would miss warmups and then play in an actual game would be if you were under the weather that day and you had an illness where you're trying to conserve every ounce of energy you possibly could, kind of thing. Other than that, it usually goes the other way around, where guys warm up and then they don't play because of injury or they're not ready to go for whatever reason. So a lot of people obviously were clued into that very quickly. And I think what it really comes down to, regardless of your viewpoint on LGBTQ plus, it goes back to this principle, and the Steve Dangle podcast obviously kind of alluded to this too very well, is that saying you respect people's choices and then not showing them like welcoming and respect are two different things. Saying you respect people as LGBTQ, even if you don't agree with it, which that's fine. You don't have to agree. You don't have to, for example, like Nick, you and I have talked about this. I'm, first of all, speaking hypothetically here, because I'm very in support of LGBTQ. I advocate like anybody else. Obviously, I'm going into nursing, so it's pretty hard to not be supportive of most people that walk through the door, right? For example, I'm not gay myself. I know that might shock you, Nick, but I'm not. And but at the same time, I don't look at that as saying, because I'm not gay, I'm not in support of this. But for Provorov, he goes, I'm not gay, and I don't like their actions in general for people who are gay. Like, that's the difference right there. And because of that, he's saying he respects people's decisions. It's not in the same light. And there was a couple of people on Twitter that outlined it very well, that basically pointed out, no, it's not about you believing or saying it's appropriate to be gay or not. It's saying, because you are different than me, I still welcome you into this place. That being the Philadelphia Flyers organization, that being an NHL hockey game, that sort of thing. And I don't know, man. Like, it's so messed up to me where, again, the Steve Dangle podcast talked about, everything is team-based in hockey. And for Provorov to not even take warmups and not show support of his team, how hard is it, even if you don't necessarily agree with something, to throw on a warmup jersey for 20 minutes that's different colors? Or they said, if you really want to make a statement, and not that they were condoning this, but if you really wanted to make a statement, wear your regular warmup jersey in warmups if you're not really about it, which probably would have caused even more of a fuss. But it's like, people are defending him because they said, he didn't want to take warmups. That's respectful. That's his choice, that sort of thing. Well, then, one, don't play him if that's his choice, because that's warmups are a team-based activity. And number two, maybe this is going on in a reach here, and this is my personal opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. But I honestly feel like some of the people that say, Provorov has the right to not warm up and that sort of thing, are the same people that were talking about people kneeling at the national anthem and saying that wasn't acceptable. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're gonna pick one line in the sand, you can't just pick and choose based on the narrative that you want to create based on your viewpoint of the world. Yeah, and the Flyers effed it up. The NHL PR effed it up the next day. This, like, it turned what could have been a real nothing burger and a really great night. Like, Kevin Hayes had a hat trick. It was a great night otherwise. But what's everybody else talking about?
So it's funny how we're in this position, and I say funny, no, not because it is funny, but it's funny how the NHL keeps tripping over itself in situations like these, because they've been pushing this stance. And if you ask Alan Walsh, he would say, no, they're really bad at this, because they are, about trying to project the league as inclusive and we're supportive of multiple fronts, but then situations like these happen. And granted, is the NHL probably prepared for this? No. And that's the problem, right? Is that, they don't have, if you want to call it a backup plan, I mean, sure. I mean, let's just call it what it is, right? You're probably not expecting a player to do this.
How about a backbone? How's
right.
that?
And to take a stance, right? And that's the thing is, they essentially try to walk around on eggshells and, around the bush. And that's not what, if you're the league and you're trying to say we support these efforts to be inclusive, and then you put out a response like that, as you mentioned, no backbone. You're talking out of both sides of your mouth, and you're no more or less wrong in the situation than Provorov himself, right?
This might be overreaching. I'm trying to think of comparables here. And maybe the best one I can come up with, and this is probably a bit of a reach, but bear with me here. We talked about saying you respect people's decisions, but then your actions don't line up with that, frame of thinking where you're welcoming. It almost makes me think of somebody who's like a white supremacist saying you respect people who aren't white, but it's like, no, your actions are not welcoming to those who don't fit the same mold as you, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, I know that's an extreme example, but maybe that's what we need to.
But it's smoke and mirrors, right, Noah? And that is, in today's society, we have, and this could go down a very deep rabbit hole, but effectively what the big issue we have is because of social media and because of this is that before that, people could say it wasn't recorded. It wasn't something where then they could stand up and deny it. And then no one would have like any sort of way to be like, no, you did say that. Well, now there's videos of stuff where people would, like you said, go out and say they say, but then you would turn around and someone's recording them and then they're acting in the exact opposite of what they said. Right. So as a society, I think we have to be better. We just have to be better at understanding that not only do our words, but more importantly, our actions have consequences. And more importantly, sometimes inaction, right? And more so that you got to be consistent at the end of the day. And in this juncture, unfortunately, Provorov was inconsistent. Even worse, the NHL was inconsistent. The Philadelphia Flyers were inconsistent. So at the end of it, on a theme night, when you're trying to welcome different, I don't want to say groups of people, but you're trying to show support for folks who have been
a demographic who has historically been shamed and put down by society.
To say, no, please, we support you. Come in and have fun at a hockey game. All fronts failed miserably.
Yeah, totally agree. It's a messy situation. And I think that, you talked about social media too. The other thing that in some ways social media is good for is the fact that, like you mentioned, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, when people were living in their own bubbles, they had their viewpoints and nobody really challenged them at times. Now you at least have the opportunity to challenge that sort of thing, in Provorov's case, for example. But yeah, what a messy situation. Good on the Flyers for trying to have a Pride night. I think in principle, like Scott Lawton, JVR, for example, two guys very supportive, put in a lot of hard work, and that kind of got really overshadowed by all of this. It really had the opportunity, all things aside, besides the Provorov piece, was a really great night for the Philadelphia organization. The Wild will see them this Thursday, by the way, at home at the XL. But not a great look, things considered, for the National Hockey League and one of their teams that everyone loves to hate in general. So it really didn't help them anymore. So
no. Speaking of looking things, I think we need to move forward here, Noah. Well, these look familiar because I'm old. The new All-Star Game uniforms. I shouldn't say new because I'm trying to remember the year, but these are essentially replicas of, was it 98 or 97?
Yeah, it's late 90s, mid to late 90s.
Of the All-Star Game. So kind of cool, actually. I really like these. A nice throwback to a late 90s All-Star Game.
A lot of people don't like them. Which is interesting. They don't like
hockey fans don't like something that's retro. You don't say.
Well, they don't like it because it's they're reverse retros of what they used to be. Pretty much. The whole cotton candy color thing, I think people are really thrown off by that sort of thing. And a lot of people are talking about, oh well, the real classics. My real retro was the old Prince of Wales, Prince Campbell, the orange and whatever jersey, which don't get me wrong, those look sick. They're beautiful. I don't think.
So wait a second. The same folks who grew up in the 90s, and did they not understand the 90s color schemes back in the day? I mean, is this really that far off of what that entire decade was about?
Yeah, especially the black jersey. I think that was like quintessential 90s right there.
It was.
I don't know what they wanted. Maybe they wanted the old purple and teal styrofoam cups, the coffee cups that you get that you put your cappuccino in at the gas station every morning that have been around since
it's the Sonic designed All-Star game. Yeah, pretty much,
I think they're okay, and I think it's funny because then people were like, "Well, we missed the red and greens or the reds and blues, of the mid 2000s and that sort of thing." And other people, "Oh, we missed the old orange and blacks from the 1980s and 70s." And like, I don't disagree with any of those takes, but like, the NHL is not going to have the same All-Star game jersey year in and year out. Like, should they reproduce jerseys maybe for multiple years if it's a good design? Yeah, maybe. But like I said, I don't think they're thrilling, but I didn't think they were as atrocious as people made it sound. I mean, it's an All-Star game. It's a unique festival. They're like a 5 for me,
And also, last year of Adidas. So how much thought do you think they put into it? I'm not saying that's the case, but let's be real.
These were the only paint colors left in the paint buckets they had.
Exactly. So. Speaking of jerseys, though, Arizona, the new third jerseys, the new, I don't know if you want to call them alternate thirds, sure. Was it the Desert Reds, I think is what they've called them?
Yeah, they had a local designer that pretty much put them together and did the Wordmark logo, which Wordmark logos historically don't do well. I don't know that this one did much better.
No.
It had a lot of potential. I think that they're just, like, if you're going to go with a simple concept for a uniform, you have to stick with that simple concept. Like the beauty of Arizona's palette and template right now, including this jersey, is the Kachina striping at the bottom. And really, that's kind of where you're going out on a limb. And I think that maybe you stick with that instead of doing a Wordmark logo, you do an actual logo and let kind of the small little aspects of the jersey speak for themselves. I think this jersey is just competing too much on what it wants to be. And it was a great idea. They're not terrible, but they're really going through an identity crisis, which actually, since it's Arizona, is very fitting. So
actually it is. I don't. It's weird, like you said. It's almost like they wanted to have something a little less busy, but then in the striping on the elbows and then on the bottom, it just kind of clashes, I think, with the top half of the jersey, which I think I like the lettering. I like the simplicity of it. There's not any different colors on the shoulders, so I think from the chest on up, I actually think it looks really good.
Would it have looked better if they would have done like the New York Rangers style block lettering and just said Arizona down the front? Like, would that have looked better if you're going to do with letters? Like, I don't
know. I think it's more just the way that the design on the bottom of the jersey and the arms, I think it just is a bit too busy when you factor in how simple it is above it. But I'm not a design professional, so maybe how my eyes are reading it.
Maybe a giant sun devil right in the. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's same. It's the same
building.
It's the same building. I see why you make that mistake. Speaking of that building, I know this is off topic, but we're about less than 4 months from that public vote. So for Tempe, so we're getting inching closer to that. I don't know. I don't mind them, but they're not my favorite. You could say that about the next third jerseys is they say new alternates. We're talking about the Vancouver Canucks, where that is an alternate universe in terms of how that thing is being run right now. We'll get to that, I'm assuming, at some point, but this isn't new. It's just a bring back of the old Pavel Bure 90s jerseys.
They look good though.
They look good. But I find it funny how they're saying new when in reality it's not.
Well, the striping is a little different. They didn't used to be that clear cut as far as the banding back in the day. And had a little bit of white,
exactly the same. And
yeah, I think they should always use that logo for something, though. I think the skating Canuck skate is always pretty cool, in my opinion. I think the crazier thing with the Canucks, maybe this is a good time to mention this. I read a thing this morning. Of course, Rick Tocchet sounds like he's probably pegged as the new coach, like we had kind of talked about last week in Vancouver. And I think it's interesting because Jim Rutherford, publicly putting out a statement that he's been searching for months for a new head coach is just asinine in so many different respects.
So many different ways.
But I read a thing this morning that talked about Bruce Boudreau basically had like a cold one with his staff, and each of the players came in individually and wished him good luck and that sort of thing. He hasn't been fired yet. It's supposed to happen on Monday. Like, what the hell is this runaway train that's flying off the tracks for Vancouver right now. JT Miller was going bonkers in the game again yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I kind of talked about it pre-show. It's like JT Miller, this is his first real team that has extensively just sucked, for lack of a better term.
He's frustrated.
And he knows he's going to be there for 7 more years. It's pretty easy to see why he's frustrated. I don't think he's handling it all that well, but I don't know that any of us would be either. And I know we've kind of ridden JT Miller kind of hard on some of this stuff, and some of it has been well-deserved. But at some point, like, you almost feel for the guy, and you definitely feel for Bruce Boudreau, the way that he's been dragged through the media and management has failed to, like, what the hell is going on in Vancouver? Like, not that Vancouver was anything crazy, but they used to be this, decently respectable organization. And then all of a sudden, Roberto Luongo is gone. And ever since that happened, they have this history of pushing really good people out of that organization and making it an absolute dumpster fire. And, like, what the hell, man?
We don't know, right? That's the thing, is there's no viable explanation to some of the things that we're seeing right now. And for those who are completely under a rock, for hockey, again, as a GM, to come out and say that, mind you, they went out and got Bruce Boudreau about this time last year, if I recall, it was around this time. Nearly resurrected Vancouver Canucks, which were, I believe, at one point in last place in the Western Conference, if not very close to it, and nearly pushed them to a playoff spot. And then even if you're Jim Rutherford or Patrick Alvin, I think is technically the GM, let's just say that you didn't really plan on Bruce being a long-term solution. He was a fill gap. Okay, fine. You don't ever come out publicly and say, I'm searching for a new coach for months,
or drag him through this process for no reason. And like, you watch some of his press conferences, some of them were kind of funny. He's like, see you guys tomorrow, I think, I hope, and but other ones, like, he got really emotional about what it meant for him to be an NHL head coach. Of course, his last gig before, in Minnesota, it really hurt him to have to be cut at the timing that he was right after the trade deadline in Minnesota. And I felt bad for him too. Like, he's a good coach. Now, do I think he's exceptional? I don't know, but he's a really good human being. And I think that goes back to our conversation about Ivan Provorov. Maybe just don't be a shitty human. Like, this is a people driven business. We aren't robots.
No.
Like,
and at the end of it, I think the other thing we missed too, Noah, is that I think just yesterday, Elliot Friedman said that, the Canucks have scheduled a hearing for Monday, which could you imagine being in Bruce Boudreau's shoes, reading Elliot Friedman, which, I mean, come on, who doesn't? I mean, he's kind of the new age Bob McKenzie, right? He's the most respectable hockey reporter that's out there. And he doesn't put out things that, shall we say, he can't triangulate. He's gotten to where he is because he's very good. How do you, as Bruce, read that, knowing that you're about to be handed your pink slip, but more so have been reading possibly for weeks that this was coming, but you still come to the rink, you get asked about it, and you still handle it with the class and a shred more humor than I would have been able to handle. I mean, geez, I would have been rage quitting in the GM's office, going, "What the hell is this?" Right? So the fact that he's been put through this one is despicable, but more so to speak to Bruce Boudreau's character, the fact that he's handled it, albeit better than I think any one of us could have ever handled, is just a true speak to how great of a human being he is. But even more so, as you mentioned, how horribly run and the tire fire that's happening inside Vancouver. And here's the problem, right? Noah, is if you're on the outside as a player or as an assistant coach who's got head coach aspirations, are you wanting to join the Vancouver Canucks organization when you're reading the calamities that are happening? I wouldn't think so.
I'm surprised Rick Tocchet wants this job if it indeed is him.
I have an idea. He wants to coach and nobody else wants him to coach.
Yeah. The other thing too is this makes Bruce Boudreau a little bit more marketable the way he's handling this. If you're a rebuilding program, you look at this and say, okay, maybe if we're not a bunch of assholes and we treat him like a normal human being, he's going to give us his best effort and the chips are going to fall where they're going to fall. So I think that it does make him more marketable in that sense. He's been around the league. He knows the game, obviously, but it's been It's been a messy situation. At least he's not in debt or filing for bankruptcy, though. I hear there's somebody else on our list that might.
Yeah, it's not Evander Kane. So,
he did return this week, though, so good for him.
He did, actually. And apparently and we'll talk about probably that another week, that situation getting also kind of murky with Evander Kane with some of the reportings that he's had in those. But how about a goaltender, Vegas Golden Knights, Robin Lehner, filed for bankruptcy, citing $50 million in debt. No, holy cow. This is a Chapter 7 filing. So it's a joint filing, so him and his wife. So in that filing, he says that he's owed money to no fewer than 50 people and companies. So just a few. One of his companies struck a deal with a Wisconsin company in a 4-year repayment plan, but missed its first 5 payments. So for those of you who play the home game, when you usually come to an agreement, you usually have kind of like a trial period the first 6 months to continue that. When you miss your first 5, that's not good. So that means that the Wisconsin company sued in late June 2022, so late last year, and basically filed that in Milwaukee U.S. District Court. What apparently he is in debt for is missed payments for a collection of rare snakes. He purchased a $1.2 million in 2017.
Yeah, that's one of the things.
That much? Holy cow.
That's just one of the things. Yeah, apparently he bought these snakes and then didn't keep the snakes in very healthy condition, so they depreciated in value. So now they're worth like $200,000 or something like that. So. Okay. Just like his injuries, not healing. The snakes apparently weren't either. I guess. Yeah.
I've heard there's some real estate stuff in there too.
Yeah.
Some business losses. Again, we don't know the full scope of it, but $50 million. That's not a small amount. And when you compare it to where in the filing, he says that he and his wife Danya estimate their assets are up to $10 million. Well, you're still $40 million in the hole. So we'll have to keep our eyes on this story as it evolves. But
you know who they should call?
Ghostbusters?
No, the newest signing from the Minnesota Wild, Matt Boldy, 7x7 for him. We're going to talk about that in the regular portion of the show. So that's a little bit of our teaser. Normally we talk about our signings. We'll talk about that in the main portion of the show with the Wild because we got a lot to touch on for them related to little tidbits this week, including Kirill Kaprizov hitting his 100th goal. So we'll talk about that. Other news around the NHL, Steven Stamkos hit 500, only the third active player right now to hit that. And the Blues get their 2,000th win in St. Louis in franchise history after beating the Sens last week. So a couple of milestones there. Second to last topic here this week, longtime Canucks enforcer Gino Odjic dies at 52. Played 8 seasons in Vancouver, had just under 100 points and just under 2,200 PIMs in 444 games in Vancouver. He has had AL amyloidosis since 2014, which unfortunately for those, it's kind of a lesser known disease. If you catch it early, there's some management. A lot of people have it as a chronic issue. They caught it a little bit too late, and in this case, it's usually fatal. So really, what is that? I think people maybe need an explanation here because it's kind of hard to explain. I think even when I was looking through it, I understood what was going on, but I realized it's a hard thing to explain to people if I was trying to explain it in a hospital setting. So the best I can give you, essentially, it's a disorder of your plasma proteins, which are usually in your bone marrow. They essentially make antibodies and other things to help your immune system help fight infection. And this disease makes them mutate, so they multiply too fast. So there's heavy chains and there's light chains of these proteins. And these are what is called the light chains in his particular case. So they essentially, instead of being produced and then slowly being churned out to where they're needed in the body, they churn out too much and then they clump up, they misform, they mutate, and then they get stuck on, around all these organs, making things difficult for him to breathe. His heart rate's off. It's actually, I hate to throw this out here because it's a sad story. But from a medical perspective, it's a really tough way to go through life, unfortunately, especially if you're nearing the end. So they essentially disrupts that organ function and weakens the immune system. So kind of knew it was coming, but it doesn't make it any easier. 52 is still plenty young. So wishing him and his family, obviously, the best of luck as they move through this difficult time. Injury-wise, our last topic here, quite a few significant ones here. Montreal's Cole Caulfield out the rest of the year with a shoulder surgery. 26 goals, second on the team with 36 points in 46 total contests. So that's a big loss for Montreal. Mm-hmm. They're also without rookie Juraj Slafkovsky for at least 3 months with a lower body ailment. He's not going to require surgery, but it kind of disrupts their plan for him, at least in the short term, and where they were trying to develop him. Former Montreal Canadian, current Carolina Hurricane Max Pacioretty tore his Achilles for the second time in 5 months. That was in the Wild game on Thursday. That was tough to watch.
Non-contact injury too, yeah.
Yeah, basically was a point per game player in like the 4 or 5 games that he returned to. So it's a tough one. You wonder if that's a career ender. Usually Achilles, they heal better and stronger the second time around, so I'm a little bit surprised that there was an issue with this, but we'll have to see if he can remedy that. He's been kind of a glass case for the past couple of years, unfortunately. And then the final one, Maple Leafs, Jason Robertson, forward out 6 months after having season-ending shoulder surgery. And welcome into the main portion of the show, January 22nd. Nick Maxon joining myself, Noah Grant, here on the Huskies Warming House podcast, welcoming everybody into the den for episode number 146. Nick, normally we spend quite a bit of time, I would say, on the NCAA men's side of things, but some fairly routine scores, a couple of notables as usual, but we're going to try to cruise through this. It is much more of a normal week, and next week is the week where we really don't have a game till next Thursday or Friday. So it is getting more cut and dry as we approach the playoffs, which is really, really nice for our reporting purposes. I know that some people, I thank our listeners and viewers, if you kind of had to sludge through some of the stuff we were going through over like the holiday break, it was kind of a difficult thing to try to report accurately. So I know it makes sense when you're looking at it on the schedule, but if you're just listening to us talk about it, sometimes it can be quite a lot. So we apologize if it felt like a lot, because it felt like a lot to us too. But let's start with the Big Ten, as we always do. Notre Dame traveled to Penn State, and exactly what any pairwise fan would want, a split. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame winning 2-1 and Penn State winning 3-2. So if you're a Huskies fan, you'll take that result all day of the week. Also, Ohio State traveling to Wisconsin. Ohio State won the second night 2-0, but Wisconsin won 4-0. The first night, this Badgers team up to the low 30s here in the pairwise. I think they're at 32 this morning. So the Badgers, maybe a real dark horse candidate to make some noise in their conference tournament in the Big Ten. I don't think they have a shot at the big dance, but they could certainly disrupt somebody's journey potentially. So kind of interesting there. They've, like you talked about pre-show, besides a really poor start, they have not been terrible. I mean, they've been formidable at least. So Ohio State needed both of those games, and 2 shutouts in either direction. I think it's the third time this season we've seen it. The other 2 have involved Notre Dame. So Michigan traveled to Minnesota this weekend, though. 2 overtime finishes. The Gophers win 4-3 the first night. Michigan wins 5-4 yesterday. Those were 2 incredible hockey games this weekend. I mean, back and forth action. 3M Arena at Mariucci was rocking, and I think that you kind of got the vibes of old WCHA a little bit. Obviously, Michigan wasn't really a part of that in those terms, but it was impressive to see the crowd there on hand. And I think that, as a Huskies fan, as much as you want to deny it, that Minnesota building, when it's seating almost 11,000 people, is a massive advantage when that building is full. The crowd noise was electric. The college hockey, the student section, the band was going. I mean, did you get a chance to catch any of these games? I mean, it was
kind of a little bit of it. Yeah. Holy cow. Again, the offensive talent and the punch and the counter punch really between these 2 heavyweights was the storyline of both games. And, the one thing I guess is, both these teams are showing a little bit this weekend that, they can handle the in-game adversities. Something that the Gophers, if there's been a knock on the Gophers, it's been at times of, hey, when, shall we say that the real challenge comes, it's sometimes maybe a little bit, I don't know if careful is the word, but just not, able to kind of respond, with a good counter. And sometimes what we're noticing is when the big boys come to town is that they're rising to the occasion, which is good.
Yeah, Bryce Brodzinski scoring the game-tying goal with just over 3 minutes left in that hockey game was very exciting last night anyway. Of course, Michigan State was off in the Big Ten. There's usually one team that's off unless they're playing a non-conference game, so I'm going to assume that trend is going to continue as we push into the second half because it's basically conference play. CCHA 2.0, Bowling Green traveled to St. Thomas. The Tommies, 4-2 victory and a 3-3 overtime finish yesterday. Great showing for St. Thomas. I hear they have a new building that we're going to talk about in the extra ice session, by the way. Apparently costs a little bit of money. Lake Superior State traveling to the border of St. Thomas, Mankato, and Mankato winning 3-2 in overtime, a bit of a scare in night number one, and then 3-1 victory in night number two. Michigan Tech traveling to Ferris, and it was a split each way. Tech winning 1-0 the first night, Ferris State 4-3 in a shootout tie yesterday. So, if you're Tech, I think it's officially a tie is what it's listed, but Ferris kind of giving people some fits as they move into the second half. Northern Michigan, Bemidji splits each way. Bemidji 4-0, Northern Michigan 5-2. So CCHA continues to offer up intrigue. ECAC here, they were the only group that really had a ton of Friday, Saturday single set matchups. So we'll try our best here. First, a game on Tuesday, Princeton beat Providence in overtime. So that wasn't great for Providence. Then Princeton played Cornell, and Cornell won that one. And why is that important? Because Cornell, the first night on Friday, beat Quinnipiac 4-0. That was big for Huskies fans, and Quinnipiac dropped their second of the weekend to Colgate 3-2. And Colgate has some common NCHC opponents. I believe Duluth is one of them. Duluth and North Dakota. I think it's Duluth. But and then Harvard lost to Brown 3-2 on Saturday. So there's another big blow to a top team in the ECAC. So the big dogs in that conference not doing so well. Hockey East, Northeastern traveled to Merrimack, and Northeastern swept Merrimack 5-1 and 1-0. So again, the big dogs in Hockey East not doing great. Maine traveling to BU, and BU crazy scores here. 5-1 and 9-6. They hit the sweep. Okay. UConn, UMass. UConn won in overtime and then swept UMass at the end of that one. That Minutemen team is, I think it's safe to say they're not good. They're just struggling. UNH traveled to UMass Lowell winning both of those. But New Hampshire did beat UMass in the Minutemen last Sunday. And then Vermont traveled for a single game set to Boston College and actually beat the Eagles. So they're a middle of the pack team, BC is, and they're now in an interesting spot as well. And then two independent scores, or matchups, I should say. Long Island sweeping Lindenwood 3-2 in overtime and 6-4 yesterday. And then RIT sweeping Arizona State 5-1 and 5-3. This RIT team is making a case in Atlantic hockey to do some serious damage here. I don't know. My dad and I were kind of talking about this. Maybe we'll get to this in the pairwise stuff, but the Huskies are a shade off from being first in the country in the pairwise. I don't even know if you want number one at this point. It always seems like to be a death sentence. This Atlantic Hockey Conference has given some serious intrigue against some pretty good opponents at times here. I think number two is not a bad place to be if you're St. Cloud.
I agree.
Yeah. What's on tap here? Big Ten, Wisconsin at Notre Dame. Michigan State travels to Minnesota. Penn State is at Michigan, and Ohio State is off. CCHA 2.0, Mankato's at Ferris, Bemidji's at Lake Superior, and Northern Michigan is at Tech. That means Bowling Green is off on Saturday. They play the U.S. under-18s next. I listed as Friday. I think it might actually be Thursday. And then the ECAC, Colgate has Harvard. We got to pay attention to Harvard now, and Cornell has Harvard. So we have to pay attention to see what they're going to do. And then Hockey East, UMass and UMass Lowell have a single game set. Merrimack travels to Vermont. The Catamounts have given teams fits. BC home and home against BU, regardless of where they are at the standings. That one's got to be circled on the calendar every year, I would think. Easily. And then Providence travels to Maine. There is also a Connecticut ice tourney that's going on, some conference and non-conference stuff, but really what's happening is Quinnipiac plays Sacred Heart, and UConn plays Yale, and then Quinnipiac will get either UConn or Yale, and Sacred Heart will get the other. So Quinnipiac has a chance to slip further in the standings depending on the results of this tournament. And then independent-wise, St. Thomas travels to Arizona State, so the Sun Devils welcome in one of the newest programs in college hockey, and the two Alaska schools, Alaska and Anchorage, do battle up in Anchorage in Seawolves territory. So Well, I think that we don't need to touch on standings this week. Let's jump right into the NCHC here, which I think has had offered a lot of intrigue for us this week. Duluth, North Dakota. It was a split each way, 4-2. North Dakota wins in night number 1. Duluth wins 2-1 in the second night. I think if you're an NCHC fan, both of these end in regulation. Luke Lohoit with the game winner yesterday with about 3 minutes to play. I think you're happy with the result here. I think you would take a split in that matchup, one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
I would think.
Yep, keeps them where they're at right now currently, which we'll touch on a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to see North Dakota drop them both too as well, but I think that keeping both of those teams in the lower echelon here, I mean, like especially if you're an Omaha fan, CC, Western Michigan, you feel pretty good about things, right? So.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly interesting. Miami, Omaha, the Mavs winning both of these 4-1 and 2-0. I think the second one was an empty netter last night, so it was certainly a close contest for the Redhawks. We'll touch on them a little bit more as a program, but Omaha, for a brief moment until the Husky score got posted, was in second place, actually above St. Cloud. So they are not doing too shabby. And then Western Michigan traveling to CC. These two teams are right next to each other in the standings, even after the results, a pair of 4-1 victories for the Broncos, beating the Tigers here. So if you're a Huskies fan, that one kind of stings, seeing the Broncos slowly
creep up.
Yeah, but at the same time, you almost will take it because CC was closer than Western was compared to that. So it's been interesting. So St. Cloud, of course, did host Denver this weekend. 7-3 was the score of the first night, and 2-0 in night number 2. Attendance in night number 1 was 4,080. And essentially going through the scoring here, Zach Okabe on the power play from Spencer Meyer and Jack Peart 6.5 minutes into that contest. And then at the halfway point, a power play goal for Denver knotted us up at 1 entering the second period, and we had a boatload of goals for both teams here. Jack Devine and Brett Edwards scoring for Denver. It was Yami Krannila, Jack Rogers, Krannila, and Mietinen, all goal scorers in period number 2. Okabe, Treyball, Spellacy, Bushy, Cruikshank, Kupka, Anhorn, and Ingram all tallying assists on those goals that had the Huskies in the driver's seat 5-3 entering period number 3. And then Mietinen's goal was a power play goal, by the way, at the end of that period. And then Grant Cruikshank responded with a power play goal of his own, his 16th of the season from Anhorn and Josh Lidke. And then Mason Salquist from Lidke with less than a minute to play in that one here. Huskies were 3 for 5 on the power play in this one, and 2 for 3 on the kill. So special teams certainly a big factor in this one. 64.7% the Huskies were in the faceoff dot on Friday night, 44 for 68, and out shooting Denver by 2. Dominic Bassi had an 870 on 23 shots. Magnus Krona had an 800, and Matt Davis came in with 2 saves as well too. So this is probably not the score that I would have anticipated if you were a St. Cloud fan. I mean, you'll certainly take it, but I was intrigued to see St. Cloud, their special teams battle here. We talked about how their PK has really struggled. Their power play has really come to life. And this might be the recipe for this Huskies team where, yeah, the PK was all right, but your power play, almost as inopportune as the penalty kill has been, your power play has to be opportunistic at the right time for this St. Cloud team in certain games. Would you say that was the difference in this one, or do you think it was a lot more than just special teams?
Well, I think we've talked about how special teams against your top tier opponents are essentially the X factor, right, Noah? But I think more importantly, you have to be worried about 5-on-5 first. And I think the Huskies won the 5-on-5 battle. More importantly, the special teams can help you, create that wider gap. It can also help prevent them from inching back into a hockey game. Yeah. But to me, I look at the 5-on-5 play, and they were the much better team at even strength. Goaltending was really, really good. So yes, the specialty teams helps. Again, we've talked about areas, especially the PK, which were becoming a bit of a blemish. But here this weekend, again, everything seemed to be clicking and mostly all cylinders. Again, it's never a perfect recipe, but I think 5-on-5 play against a Denver team, again, reigning national champions, that's what I looked at. And that, to me, that was the bigger storyline this weekend than it was maybe special teams. It looked good to see that a lot of those are starting to come back into the fold and maybe a bit more success on those fronts as well.
Yeah, I had kind of predicted this on MNCAA, where I predicted a sweep simply because of the fact that Denver had not had some strong opponents, and St. Cloud was coming off an interesting weekend against the Tigers, and then the Minnesota series the weekend before that. And this Denver team did not look like the fire wagon powerhouse that we had seen when we were at Magnus Arena, where the Huskies had to really fight and claw for every inch to get that victory the first night. They, like you said, St. Cloud was the more dominant team throughout most of this hockey game, besides maybe some penalty kill stuff. So even on Saturday, they were 1 for 2 on the power play and had a perfect kill on the lone opportunity Denver had. So, I mean, yeah, it was, like you said, I don't think a complete 60-minute effort really exists in the game of hockey, but for large stretches of hockey, St. Cloud was the better team. And one of the things that made them really successful, I think, even as you moved into Saturday, attendance was 51-48 in this one, by the way. So actually more than the Matt Cullen ceremony game, actually, by about 40 people. So I think that what made St. Cloud successful is their ability to alleviate pressure. We talked about it when they were under duress. Sometimes they were just content to float a puck out to neutral, float a puck out, past center ice and just change, reset, regroup, and it earned them a victory and a pair of victories. Jack Rogers at the 7:32 mark of period number 2, and Zach Okabe, his 15th of the season on the power play. Kronila, a pair of assists. Joey Molinar and Jack Peart, other assists in this one. Shots 23-19 St. Cloud, a bit of a lower shooting game. And the Huskies were almost 56% in the dot. Jackson Castor was perfect. Magnus Corona had a 913, stopped 21 of 23. So, of course, one of the big stories before the game was Dylan Anhorn out of the lineup, probably because of that collision he took late in the first game. So hopefully he can have some rest and recuperation as we go through this. But a much more subdued, tight checking hockey game. Teams kind of feeling themselves out in this one here. We'll get to the reviews at the end of period number 2 in a second, but I think that this game did not have the pace that I had anticipated after seeing the back and forth action in the first night. You wonder if David Carl maybe had an adjustment there to try to slow things down, at least in the neutral zone for St. Cloud, but the Huskies kind of slow and methodical to the finish line in this one and come away with a crucial 6 points.
And that's the thing, right? Especially with the way that this schedule shaked out this weekend. I mean, they really needed as many points as they can get. And I know that we talked last week about the Penrose and, maybe thinking that we were expecting maybe a split this weekend. Okay, but really the 6 was more needed than we think, right? Especially with some of the other results. It's kind of a logjam now at the top here, as we look at the NCHC standings. In fact, again, St. Cloud technically with the tiebreaker over Denver have winning 3 or 4. And then Omaha right behind 2 points less at 27, Western Michigan 25. And then Colorado College after this weekend in 5th, it's 20. So a 9-point gap between essentially where St. Cloud is at and a away ice standing position for the NCHC playoffs. So this was needed. And let's just say that, for the men's hockey schedule, now there's no excuses, right? They got a favorable schedule, shall we say it, with some of their next opponents.
I don't know, man. To say it's a favorable schedule, I don't know that I would call it that in the sense that really, like,
what I mean by favorable is you and I both know this, right? Is that it's not, it's scary because it can be kind of a trap. They're going to be the paper, favorite team, but again, it's like it's the NCHC. I mean, it's not as easy as we want to believe it is.
Well, let's back up to Saturday. The one other thing I really wanted to touch on here, we had 2 reviews at the end of period number 2 with about 3 minutes and a minute and a half remaining in this one. And I know a lot of people were up in arms. They were both goal reviews here. The first one, of course, a pretty routine shot on Jackson Castor that essentially ended up squeaking through him, slow rolling puck, and the official was on the same side as the netminder, blew the play dead, and then it was rolling and slowly trickled into the back of the net there. And then the second one essentially was for the Huskies, and they chipped a puck off the end wall and off the side of the net, and then they tried to jam play and ended up on top of the goaltender's pad, and the goaltender's pad was sliding back into the net there, which I thought that one would have been tough to overturn from a no goal on the ice there. I mean, it was just really difficult to see all the way around. When there were a lot of people that were kind of up in arms about how long the reviews take. And I agree, the first one probably took a little bit too long. But I have no problem with officials reviewing goal reviews. I think that we talked a lot about, like the offside reviews take too long. Some of these chintzy penalties take too long. Like now, if it's a true major or there's a serious injury on the play, that's different. But some of these penalties, like, oh, it was a trip, but we're seeing if it was a major. Like, how are you going to get a major out of a tripping call? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Stuff like that. So I had no problem with the officials blowing both these plays dead. I think the first one, a lot of people, and like I said, the review took a bit longer, but I think a lot of people were up in arms about how long it took, not realizing that, number one, why was this play blown dead? Well, the official is on the same side as the netminder, and this is a routine save 99 out of 100 shots. I mean, normally this puck doesn't squeak through. It hit him right in the breadbasket, right in the middle of the logo on his chest. So the official is thinking, oh, simple save, I'm going to blow the play dead, and it ended up trickling through. Early whistles happen in hockey. But at the same time, if you're the official who's in the corner there, I think you want to take a look at that, right? You want to take a look at it, make sure you had it right. I'm assuming the reviews have audio, so they're listening for the timing of the whistle relative to where the puck was, to make sure that it was indeed blown dead early enough. Otherwise, for those who don't know, if a goal goes over the goal line, but the official had the intention of blowing the whistle, you could still wave it off, but you could also call it a goal. But like we talked about, if you blow it before it crosses the line, it's negated regardless. So I think they just wanted to make sure they were doing their due diligence, and people were screaming at the TV with the length of the review. But let's realize the officials haven't seen the 27 TV replays that we have seen by the time they get over to the box, right? Like they're on the ice. They want to make sure they got the call right. Then the second one was a bit interesting. I don't think it was going to be a goal anyway. It was just too inconclusive. But, I mean, do you feel the fans' frustration with the length review? I know the NCHC officiating has been a hot topic. We discussed it even on our show, had a live breakdown. But I think personally, for goal reviews, I didn't think it was anything egregious.
No, and we talked about this, right? In the sense of reviews, and we had Mike Schmidt on and discussing some of the technological, sometimes the difficulties with not every arena having, shall we say, the working equipment, and then sometimes there's equipment failures, and so it's more than just the review, right? So it is a topic of conversation, not only in the NCHC but around hockey, in the sense, in terms of what are we getting to the point where we're becoming baseball? We've seen, shall we say, the NFL try something differently in the playoffs. And I mentioned the expedited reviews, and those actually have been really, really nice. So you have essentially an off-ice official that's consistently watching, sort of like the NHL War Room in Toronto, but more so they can just jump in and essentially make the call. They're not, having to be called in. So that's sort of speeding up the process. I kind of wonder if hockey is going to adapt something like that in the future. I think it should, especially with at the Herbucks National Hockey Center, again, HP Productions, and some of the camera reviews, they've got some of the better looks around the entire NCHC that at their disposal. I mean, you would think that you'd be able to come to a little bit better of a conclusion. But the problem with some of those reviews is sometimes it's, did I blow the whistle on time? There's a video thing, right? So it's more complicated than that, right? And I'm not sure if this applies to college hockey. I don't think there's that goofy, vague, like, oh, I meant to blow the whistle in college hockey. I don't think that exists. So
it exists in every level. Officials.
Okay.
Officials. So, for example, let's say you have a goaltender who has the puck covered, right? And then someone comes in and he pokes the puck out from underneath the goaltender's glove and it goes in the net. You as an official at any level can say it's no goal because the intention was to blow the whistle, but while I was putting the whistle to my mouth, essentially, then that play happened. So that you essentially can say, even though that this happened, my intention was to blow this play dead, it's no goal. So it is actually in effect at any level, including beer league, ladies and gentlemen. But, it's interesting, like Jim Rich and Gino were talking about, they're like, I don't understand why this is a reviewable play. It's definitely a reviewable play. I mean, you can take a look and listen to any, make sure that the whistle is going at the appropriate time. So it is definitely a reviewable play. So there's no argument on that one. I believe it's like bullet point number 3 in the officials review category for the NCHC protocol. But like I said, maybe it took a little bit too long, but I think the issue, like you talked about with, having somebody who's the off-ice official who is maybe ready to kind of cue them up and say, yep, this is what we saw. This is definitively no goal. Like, you don't need to spend time on this. It's staffing. A lot of these officials, they're weekend warriors. Essentially, they've got regular jobs during the week and then they fly wherever they're going or travel or whatever it is to do these games. I think that maybe the NCHC maybe is stretched a little thin potentially with trying to get that staffed. I like the idea. I just wonder if we're in kind of an interesting spot as far as that is concerned too. And this is cheesy because I ref beer league, but it's easy for us to be on officials when you don't do the job. And then when you do the job, sometimes all you're looking for is the trapdoor and a way out because situations are difficult and you're the only one that's making that decision, or the team that you're with, the group that you're with. So I had no problem with the goal reviews. They took a little bit longer than maybe they should have, but at the end of the day, they got the call right. And comparative to offside reviews, you have to get goal calls right. You have to get them right. We talked about this with Max Veach's Bulldogs in Duluth, which the Huskies will see next weekend. And that shootout opportunity when the Huskies got the winner in that one, when we're trying to decide if the play was going to go across. So moving on to NCHC standings things here, Nick. 29, 29, 27, 25 here. St. Cloud, Denver, Omaha, Western. CC is in 5th at 20. I think they're probably the last team that has a legitimate shot at home ice. I would say Duluth, North Dakota, Miami are all out of it here at 16, 15, and 7. Every team has played 14 games to this point, meaning we've got 10 to go for each club. CC has an uphill battle, though, home and home against Denver. Omaha travels to Western Michigan. North Dakota travels to Miami. So maybe some crucial points for North Dakota if they can kind of string things back together and right the ship a little bit here. And then St. Cloud, of course, will travel up to Amsoil and be in Duluth this upcoming weekend here. So as far as pairwise changes, well, let's preview the men here before we get to the pairwise. This is the first time the Huskies have seen Duluth. Like you mentioned, 8 of their last 10 games are against opponents who are below 500 or, low-ranked opponents in the pairwise. So it's an important stretch for this St. Cloud team. They will see the Bulldogs 4 times, the most of any opponent down the stretch. I believe it's North Dakota, Miami, and I can't remember the last one. Omaha, maybe.
Yeah, Omaha's in there.
So this is a big weekend for St. Cloud to stay pat, not only in the NCHC, but really make sure that their pairwise, implications are important here. I'll take a look at where Duluth is. I'm guessing they're probably got to be mid-30s. I'm assuming
they were
31 this morning. So right next to Wisconsin. So what do you expect from this Bulldog club that really has struggled this season? And what can it's scary because, like I said, you've got 4 matchups against Duluth and then 2 matchups against North Dakota, which they're almost the same mold right now in the NCHC and pairwise.
You'd have to expect some desperate hockey. Right. That's the big thing is Duluth knows where they're at. And we've seen Scott Sandlin's teams be second half teams. This is a different situation where you could see that there was some positives to their game. You could see that, there was just maybe a couple of things hit or miss that were preventing them from maybe getting a win here or there. This Bulldogs team on both sides of the puck is struggling mightily. You want to know a scary stat? UMD has scored 55 goals. That's it so far in conference play. Miami, who is the worst, has scored 51. Yeah. So they're not scoring goals. And then more so, I think that the bigger key to this is their goals against, right? UMD usually hallmark for the defensive. I think they've given up 88 or 85 goals. So I mean, it's not looking great.
Yeah, conference wise, Duluth 32 goals for, 44 against, so a -12. Goal diff, and then overall they are -15. They've scored 55 and given up 70. So compared to 51 to 88 for Miami overall, and
flipped. Okay,
and then 21 to 60 for Miami in conference play. But it's interesting. You mentioned North Dakota, a team that really scores a lot. They're still giving up a ton too. Like the games that they're in, they're losing by 1 or 2 because their firepower shows up, and then they can't by a bounce. They can't get goaltending. So.
Yeah. Exactly. So I don't know. It's in their specialty teams are not great. Again, for Max Veach, their friend, they're drying the ire of the whistles. But UMD knows that this is it, right? Every time that these weekends keep, cruising along, And I don't know, Noah, maybe this is a question for you, because when you're in the shoes of Minnesota Duluth, you see the numbers, right? I mean, there's no denying that this has been a struggle all year.
They have to win the NCHC to make the tournament.
Pretty much, right? So at this point, are you more concerned about wins and losses at this point? Or are you more just concerned as, hey, I just need to get this team to play
the right way,
good hockey, right?
Yeah, you're worried about March hockey. You're looking at the first round of the Frozen Face-Off, the playoffs, whatever you want to call it. That's what you're looking at, and you're looking at, can we get into that 6th spot to give ourselves a chance and play Omaha or Western Michigan, for example? That's what you're looking for. I think that, or maybe even into that 5th spot, if you can really climb up there and maybe make a late surge and a late lunge, depending on what CC does, for example. But yeah, this Bulldogs team is in a really tough predicament when it comes to this. Honestly, not that I'm complaining. I mean, they enjoyed their plethora of riches similar to what North Dakota has done over the past decade. I like it. Omaha has surprised us. CC has, even though we talked about how good they were going to be, has still surprised us. Like, this is fun. This is fun to watch the NCHC and have this intrigue a little bit here. I say that in the sense that St. Cloud is good this year. I think if you're a North Dakota fan, you're feeling a little bit different about the way things are going, but I think it's been exciting. St. Cloud moving up to number 2 in the pairwise, right behind Minnesota with the losses for Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac dropping to 4. Penn State at 3. Denver is at 5. So they essentially dropped a spot. They replaced St. Cloud in that regard. BU, Ohio State, Michigan. Western Michigan is at 9, sneaking up there for NCHC teams. Cornell is at 10. Let me say that again. Cornell is at 10.
I know. How about that?
Harvard at 11. Michigan Tech is still hanging around at 12. Michigan State, Mankato, Notre Dame is at 15, which is interesting to me. And UConn is at 16. RIT has moved up to 17, the best of the Atlantic hockey bids right now. Merrimack down to 18 after last weekend. That the schedule's kind of catching up to them a little bit. They need to right the ship quickly. Providence at 19. Omaha is now at 20. Alaska Fairbanks at 21. North Dakota is at 24.
Not sure.
Well, their non-conference schedule,
I know,
kind of helped them. Duluth at 31, right next to our buddies in Wisconsin. CC is right behind them at 33, actually. And then I'm looking for Miami here. Miami's at 46. If you're a Huskies fan, like you would love to see Miami climb. That loss against the Redhawks hurts badly. That loss might honestly be the difference between them being number 1 versus number 2 in the pairwise right now. Like, that might be it.
Or a 1 seed versus a 2 seed. Depending on how things shake out.
Yeah, so got to have a good second half if you're St. Cloud and you're pushing into that. Well, let's flip over to the women's side of things here. Of course, they had probably one of the best teams in college hockey, Ohio State. Before we get to that, of course, we did have to wrap up the under-18 Women's Worlds. Canada played Sweden in that gold medal game. We didn't get to it. Didn't miss much. Canada won 10-0 to take gold in that one. How about I'm going to butcher this name because I've heard it a million times. I'm still going to butcher it. Lapusanova Nella for Slovakia had 9 goals, 3 assists, 12 points, +5 pace the entire tournament.
She's a 14-year-old, right?
Yeah. Oh my. Disgusting at hockey.
She's nasty.
So good at hockey. I kind of noticed it last week and I brushed over it, and I wanted to come back to it this week because she was just incredibly impressive and definitely deserved her shout out. I mean, that's something you need these countries like Slovakia and other countries that have not traditionally been hockey powerhouses. Although Slovakia has been at the NHL level, but I think overall internationally for all, men and women of all ages kind of thing, to have players like this that generate interest on the international stage and players that are really good. So, Nella, what a great tournament. I mean, pacing above Canadian players when their last game was 10-0. I mean, it was just incredible to see. Moving over stateside, the WCHA, Minnesota traveled to Bemidji State 7-0 and 4-1. The Gophers win them both. Mankato in Wisconsin and Duluth at St. Thomas, both these Saturday-Sunday matchups, so we only have one score for you. Wisconsin won 2-1 against Mankato. This Badger team, I don't know, man. Like,
they're not as formidable as they have been in years past.
Like I said, I almost think St. Cloud wants to hang out in 6th. Like, not to say you're not going to have to get through opponents regardless, but like this Badgers team
they've kind of cooled off a bit the second half.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Duluth beating St. Thomas 3-0. So Yeah, it's been kind of
The list just
interesting.
continues to, they could
Yeah.
contend in third place.
Was kind of surprised how low scoring that game was, though. This St. Thomas team is maybe a year or two away from maybe doing some damage, depending on the recruits that they bring in the next couple of years. Ohio State traveled to the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center. It was a home and home for men and women, 6-2 and 3-2 in overtime. A pair of wins for Ohio State. The Huskies do pick up a crucial point, obviously. Attendance was 522 on Friday, not too shabby. I certainly would like it to be even higher, but not too shabby. 44% in the faceoff circle, 27 for 61. Shots 37-16, Ohio State. JoJo Chobak had an 838, stopping 31 of 37. Reagan Kirk stopped 10 of 12, and Amanda Thiel was perfect, 4 for 4. An 833 for Kirk on that stat line, by the way. Ohio State 1 for 2 on the power play. The Huskies had no opportunity in this one. Goals coming from Emma Gentry unassisted and Dale Ross, her first of the season, from Allie Cornelius and Tatum Geyer, those both in period number 2. So it was essentially 4-2 Ohio State after 2, and then the Buckeyes tacked on 2 in the first 7 minutes of period number 3. But Saturday was the game that offered a lot more intrigue, obviously, because of the overtime finish. Although, if you looked at the stat line, you wouldn't have expected the score that we had. Shots 50-17 in favor of Ohio State. Huskies one away from being in the over in the faceoff category, 26 for 53 at 49%. Sonny Ahola had a 940, stopping 47 of 50.
Yeah.
What a performance that was. And Amanda Thiel stopped 15 of 17 for an 882. Ohio State was 0 for 3 on the man advantage, but yeah, Nick, we got the scoring started. Sophia Jacques, of course, scoring for Ohio State. No surprise there. That was 1-0 after period number 1. Svenja Vogt in period number 2 from Gentry and Grace Wolf had us knotted up at ones entering period number 3, and it was 1 goal each way. Ohio State first, and then Addie Scribner 2 minutes later, her 4th of the season from Dale Ross and Emma Gentry, before Jennifer Gardner, her 14th of the season, 1 minute and 11 seconds into overtime. So a much better showing for St. Cloud, I think, overall in the weekend. I think 6-2, the game kind of got away from them a little bit at the end on Friday. 416 was the attendance on Saturday, but obviously a much closer score. We talked about it, though, where if you have a big dog, yes, they beat Minnesota. Yes, Ohio State, is probably one of the best teams in the country. But if you can kind of hang around against some of these teams where, yes, they're better on paper, this Huskies team has had enough pushback where they've had some punch and able to get a little bit of offensive production if they're getting good goaltending. They've kind of slipped in recent weeks, so I think this was a good rebound for confidence, especially heading into next weekend against Bemidji State. What do you take from this weekend before we get to the standings?
It's still close, but still, it's almost more frustrating that you're hanging with and you just can't find a way to get on top, right? So, which I guess is a better, shall we say, what we've been used to, because it's like, okay, well, from a fan's perspective, it's like, okay, how bad is it going to be this weekend, right? Because we used to go to Wisconsin 10-0, 9-1, right? And granted, Friday, Ohio State show that they're number 2 in the WCHA 6-2. But for St. Cloud, that's sort of their next endeavor, right? Is, yes, we're hanging around and, they're being much better defensively, structurally, they're a much better team, but now can they capitalize on some of those counter punches, right? I think that's kind of the next step. So you're feeling better because these games are not blowouts anymore. You are really keeping these games competitive, but now it's how can you continue to put more pucks in the net and really, put scares in these upper teams? How can you finally capitalize on some of those offensive chances to try to, I don't want to say steal a game, but earn a victory against these top squads more consistently? Because, the goal for one, that's great. But the more of these you keep losing, the more it looks like a one-off. And I know for St. Cloud, you don't want that. You want to put your, flag in the sand and say, no, we are competitive. Yeah. We're still, in the bottom half of the WCHA, but we're climbing up and be scared.
Yeah, definitely. I was trying to do the math here. The Huskies, of course, have 4 weekend matchups left. They have Bemidji, Wisconsin, Duluth, and Mankato. And I was trying to do the math here. Essentially 8 games, it's a 3-point spread, so 24 here. The Huskies would take a pretty big uphill battle. Their destiny is kind of in their own hands, though. If they beat both Duluth and Mankato and Bemidji, they would put themselves in a good spot where, the Wisconsin series will be what it is. But If they could win 6 of their last 8, they would give themselves a serious chance against the teams above them. Right now, as it stands, Minnesota's at 53, 17-1-2 in the WCHA. Guess who handed them that regulation loss this year?
Oh, yes, right.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Ohio State right behind at 49. I'm sure the Buckeyes are pretty happy about that loss in general. Wisconsin at 41. I'm going to say the Badgers maybe are in a spot where they maybe don't climb out of third.
Yeah.
I think for top 2 spots are anyone's guess, but I think the Badgers might be pushing themselves a little bit too far. In fact, they're within a stone's throw right now of Duluth.
Yes, they are.
So that's a little bit interesting. Duluth is at 36. Mankato rounding out the start of the away seeds at number 5, 22 points compared to 19 for St. Cloud and 6. So the Huskies still a lot to play for here. St. Thomas at 8 points, Bemidji State pulling up the rear at 3 points respectively. So a big weekend, obviously. Mankato traveling to Wisconsin Saturday, Sunday, like we mentioned. So we'll have those scores next week, as well as the Duluth St. Thomas result from today. Then Minnesota travels to Duluth. That's a big matchup that if you're a Huskies fan, I would say you're hoping for a Gopher sweep there. I mean,
Yeah, I would think so.
Then Mankato traveling to Ohio State, you would hope the Buckeyes get the job done. So you're hoping the top 2 seeds get the job done there. Wisconsin at St. Thomas. I guess you're cheering for Wisconsin, I guess.
Probably.
I mean, you don't want St. Thomas to, I mean, that's a 6-point swing that would put St. Thomas within 5 points of St. Cloud if the Huskies were to, for whatever reason, drop both next weekend. They have Bemidji State Friday to Saturday. According to Nick Maxon, apparently Saturday is an important day for him. So, what are the Huskies doing on that day, Nick? On the women's side,
they're playing on a hockey day.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Will you be there, or like in Cancun? Where will you be?
Cancun. That actually would be nice too, considering the weather. No, I will be on Bally Sports North broadcasting that game. So part of the Hockey Day Minnesota crew. Certainly is kind of surreal still to be saying that out loud. Again, it's a one-off game, but I think when you grow up in again, Hockey Day was in 2007 was the first one, I believe.
Yeah, 06 or 07, I can't remember.
Yep. It's been around for a while. It's a really unique event that takes place. I mean, regardless if it's any sport around the country, I mean, I don't think you have something similar like this to be a part of that broadcast crew, and to be able to be part of that is very humbling, very honoring to be a part of that. So it's a small part of it, albeit, but excited to be part of that broadcast. It's a 1:00 puck drop on Saturday. So if you can't go up to the Herbrooks National Hockey Center, which we will touch on more later, about arenas, but certainly turn in to Bally Sports to catch the broadcast, and we'll see you Huskies win, hopefully.
You know what? I had a random thought because you said, it's a one-off sort of thing. So if Hockey Day Minnesota is, for example, in Rochester, and it's a one-off, can the coaches walk into the locker room and say, you're playing like this is a throwaway game up in Rochester because it's actually a one-off in Rochester? I'm just asking. I
mean, you let the Norway tie you, so I guess.
yeah, no kidding. Yeah. You know what's interesting? Spoiler alert for those who have watched Miracle. I know we've talked about this before, but if you don't want to hear a spoiler alert, pause for 5 seconds. The whole Mike Eruzione seed, Winthrop, Massachusetts, I played for the United States of America. Yeah, it never happened. They got bag skated for almost 50 minutes and then just got off the ice. So there's your childhood ruined, unfortunately. But with that being said, speaking of childhoods being ruined, maybe Minnesota Wild talk here as we move on over. Not a great week for them, all things considered, although a pretty tough road swing, let's be honest. Goal differential still doing all right, though. They only were -1 on the week, so plus 15 overall. 25, 16, and 4 were the Minnesota Wild at 54 points. They are third in the Central by a single point. Colorado was 7 points back last Sunday. They played late last night, I believe, against Seattle and won. They are 1 point back with equal games right now. So if you're Minnesota, you got to take care of business here quickly. Washington was a 4-2 victory before a 5-2 loss in Carolina and a 5-3 loss in Florida last night. The one last night really hurt because they basically had like an AHL starter and like 6 guys out of the lineup. I mean, they should have capitalized in that game against the Panthers yesterday, and they did not. They have Tampa on the road on Tuesday before coming back home for Philly on Thursday, Buffalo on Saturday, and then a little bit of time off. I believe we're approaching the All-Star weekend, but they at least have 3 or 4 days off in that upcoming Sunday, Monday, Tuesday maybe even Wednesday after that. So 5-3-2 in their last 10. But let's start with the positive stuff. Let's start with the negative stuff because there's only one negative thing. Carolina and Florida, notable name out of the lineup for both of those. Matt Dumba, double healthy scratch here. Speculation about a trade that a lot of people say it's not going to happen. A lot of people say, of course, regardless, it's based on merit, based on play in that game against Washington. Dumba knows his time is nearing an end. You read The Athletic and you can see he's pretty glum about the entire thing, trying to stay professional, but he sees the writing on the wall here. Yeah. But if you're looking at the writing on the wall, if you're a Wild fan, apparently it looks like hieroglyphics to a lot of people. What do you see?
This was a test of that trade, potentially, right?
I thought somebody said there's only a 1% chance.
You're right, I did, because the reality is they want what this signifies to me and why I may be wrong last week is I know that Bill Guerin wants a defenseman back. That's what they want, right?
Yeah.
Really what this was with Goligoski is a test of, well, what if I can't get a defenseman back in this trade? That's what it is. So what does my defensive core look like with Matt Dumba out of the lineup? And shall we say it has, so for those who give Matt Dumba crap, and granted, sometimes he deserves it, just like any other player, right? They make mistakes here and there.
Right. That goal by... I can see his name. Anyway, that goal that everyone was ripping him apart for on Tuesday was not his fault, by the way. It was Matt Zuccarello's guy. I mean, he could have helped, but let's just clarify that in case anybody missed that. I mean, it was not that one play was not the defining factor for him being out of the lineup.
No, not at all. And more of a defensive breakdown in that play in general. But that's neither here nor there. But that's what this is. You don't trade a player right now. You have no reason to trade a player right now. But I do think you are testing the waters a bit. And I think there's concerns here, right? Goligoski is a sort of serviceable defenseman, but how serviceable when he's been scratched, 26 or 27 times, right? There's certainly his foot speed's a concern. So you kind of wonder what Bill Guerin's thinking right now. So I don't know. It's tough because I know that Minnesota Wild fans are never happy no matter what you give them. So, because here's the thing, you trade them away, they're happy. But then all of a sudden, Minnesota Wild might slip because, as we'll talk, Colorado has started to rebound because they're starting to get healthy bodies back. And then they're going to be like, well, we should never trade him until afterwards. So then you wait and then he walks and then Wild fans will be whining that, oh, we let him walk for nothing. So it's like there's just no way to win with this with this fan base.
Right.
So I don't know. That's how I see it. I see it as, okay, they're not protecting him. I mean, come on. We know who he is. He's a tough guy. He's a hockey player, albeit. But this was more for Bill Guerin to see what this team looks like against, formidable opponents, again, against Florida, who, despite their record, I think is better than what their record shows. Again, they've had some injury issues. Carolina. So you're going up against what? Stanley Cup playoff type teams. And that was your result, right? So it's giving him something to think about. And you kind of wonder if the results of these last couple of games will change his mind in terms of whether he does want to pull a trigger in a trade prior to the deadline. And more so, if he does he really now need a defenseman return that can help in the lineup now? Or is he in a situation where he goes, nope, the offer isn't good enough. I have to wait this out and maybe see what happens for agency. I think that's what this is all about. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't really know if I have a thought. I could see it going both ways. I think that there's, again, we've made the case where Matt Dumba is a serviceable defenseman. And I think that if you hang on to him, I think you at least have to give him a look in free agency. But like you said, if a team like Ottawa comes at $4.5 million for 3 years, you don't match that. You let him walk, right? But I think if you can get him at 2.2, 2.3 for 2 or 3 years, I think it's something you pull the trigger on. I think he's still serviceable enough to create opportunities.
And more so, Noah, so does that mean that you would rather keep him on the roster until the end of the season, or would you rather see him traded?
I mean, I wouldn't mind keeping him because I don't know what the return's going to be based on the Wild's cap situation, right? Like you mentioned. And
more so just to play on the ice. That's my
I do think that we've moved from 1% trade possibility to I'm going to say 15.
Yeah.
somewhere around there.
Fair. Yep.
Maybe 20 if you want to get a little bit overzealous. But it's interesting. I still like him. I like him as a player. He's a great guy in the community, which I know means absolutely nothing. Just ask Jason Zucker.
Subban.
Yeah, no kidding. But, at the same time, it's like I think he's a good locker room guy. I would love to see him stay in Minnesota. You can tell it means a lot to him. I still think he's a good number 4 defenseman. I think will be an appropriate spot. Maybe number 5 is, depending on what your D-core looks like. But he's certainly a second pairing, top third pairing. He's right in that weird little window where it's like he's good enough to be a second pairing defenseman and probably too good to be a third pairing defenseman kind of thing. Right in that little window. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know what they're going to do with him, but we're going to have our answer. When is the trade deadline over anyway?
March 2nd, something like that.
Say we've got about a month and change. I was going to say like 6 weeks, maybe something like that, 5 weeks.
About 5 weeks, yeah.
So, speaking of the passage of time, though, Nick, was there anything else you wanted to add on that, by the way?
No, other than the fact that, again, everybody likes those knee-jerk reactions like, oh, he's going to be traded. You don't trade somebody January 22nd when you could wait till March 2nd and have someone overpay for him, right? So you could get better value from him by waiting. There's no reason you trade him right now.
You mean the same group of people who said that we should trade Kirill Kaprizov because he was asking for $9 million a year? Those guys,
the same one that says that,
blow it up. Speaking of which, though, Kirill Kaprizov is our next topic here. 100 goals for him in Wild history. He sits 10th all time on that list. He is 6 behind Pierre-Marc Bouchard, 7 behind Spurgeon, 10 behind Niederreiter, 11 behind Eric Stahl, 19 behind Andrew Brunette, 32 behind Jason Zucker before we really start to extend that list pretty heavily. 199 for Zach Parise at 3rd, 205 for Mikko Koivu, Marian Gaborik at 219. I would be shocked if Kaprizov does not end up at the top of this list. He might get there near the end of his contract. As far as assists and points, he's probably about 12th or 13th in assists and maybe about the same in points here. Matt Dumba is at 10th with 155 assists. Kaprizov is 115, so he might be around like 12 to 15, somewhere around there. I can only see to 10 where I'm looking right now. And then points, Charlie Coyle has 242. He's at 10. Kaprizov is at 215. So kind of gives you an idea. The statistical leader for assists and points is Mikko Koivu with both at 504 and 709 respectively. So, and of course, Marian Gaborik is the leader in goals at 219, like we mentioned. So I have no doubt, at least for goals, Kirill Kaprizov will get there. Assist-wise might be a bit tough. 500 assists is a lot of assists.
Yeah.
It all depends on who he's going to have around him. Not that that's been a discussion of Wild hockey.
Never at all.
Some guy that will be there for a while, though. Matt Boldy, 21 years of age, 7x7, $49 million extension for him. He's really struggled. I think he before he scored yesterday, it was like 12 straight games that he had gone without a goal. He was lighting it up early in the season, but that's kind of how hockey goes. Sometimes you have this ebb and flow. He's kind of a streaky goal scorer at times.
I'm not as concerned though, Noah. And here's
do you like the deal?
I do, sort of. And here's why I say it.
Thanks. And that's our show for the week.
Right, exactly. To your point about Boldy, I think he's been more snake bit, not necessarily struggling. When I've watched his game, he's still creating a lot of offense. To me, he was getting chances, just maybe not capitalizing on a couple. So it's not like he's been invisible offensively. He's so good at puck protection, and holding on to it and finding the right play. But I would like to see him obviously, convert some of those chances. But here's the good. You lock up a really good young player that continues to grow and develop for 7 years. That's great.
Yeah.
Here's the bad. The Wild and the NHL have a salary cap crunch. And then also next year, the extra $2 million for Zach Parise, Ryan Suter go up to the $14 million cap hit season starter, I guess one of two.
And that's the argument why people say get rid of Matt Dumba, because you alleviate $6 million in cap space regardless, and you're not worried about re-signing him kind of thing.
Well, and to a degree, a couple of factors that let's talk about this, right? So you're banking on a couple of things. And let's just say that they've already tried this and it failed. Why do I say that? You tried this with Marco Rossi. I don't think he's going to come up to the big club the rest of the year, and he shouldn't, right? I think he showed that he was not ready yet. You're kind of putting that same pressure on guys like Kalen Addison. How about Brock Faber? Some guys that are young guys that would be, from a money perspective, much cheaper, but maybe are in a position where they're young and they still have to adjust to the NHL game. So you're kind of rolling the dice a little bit here, Noah.
Yeah.
And
Marco Rossi, 20 points in 20 games, by the way, in case anyone was curious. 7 goals, 13 assists, +4. So
which is great because he had those same kind of numbers when he was there last year.
He had 53 and 63. So
right. So the question is, how is he getting those numbers, right? And because again, the big knock on
3
Rossi,
power play goals
from Guerin was, he's almost too nice. We need to see him, be more of a bull with the puck. And so I don't know. It's a tough situation. So now, granted, I'd rather have the Boldy extension than not. I think a lot of people like myself are predicting a bridge deal to try to get past the next couple of years. But what could end up happening is this could be a very good team-friendly value if he continues to develop. And if he can get past those next couple of seasons, then there's going to be a lot of money at stake for the Minnesota Wild. So, yeah. I don't know. I don't know. What's your thoughts on it? I like the deal. It could be a very team friendly.
If he continues to progress the way that he has, this could look like a steal after year 3, right? I mean, He's young. He's 21. Let's not forget that. So, I mean, at year 3, he'll be 24. Think about that. I mean, it's
crazy.
It could be a very good deal for the Wild. I don't see any issues unless you have an injury bug that hampers him or his game, just as. If we're talking about throwaway games in Rochester, if his game just goes to hell, right?
It's not going to do that. So
yeah, but I'm sure he'd like to stay because they're a family. Okay, enough with the Miracle references. But I did watch it last week. It's been a while actually, but I still got the quotes down. No worries. But with that being said, the Wild here, kind of an interesting little stretch. I think they need a pretty good push through the next week before they have some serious time off here. Of course, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, as usual, the last 2 at home against Philly and Buffalo. They're in Tampa Bay on Tuesday at Amalie Arena. Of course, the future site of the Frozen Four here in the college hockey world this season. So that will do it for the main portion of the show. You are not going to want to miss the Extra Ice session. We have a lot to dive into here related to all things college hockey. And welcome into the Extra Ice session, episode 146 here, The Den, Huskies Warming House podcast. Noah Grant, I'm over here. Nick Maxon, hey, how you doing? Good to see you wave for the fans here. I like to see it. A happy Nick Maxon is a good Nick Maxon, although we'll see if that's at the dinner table or not. But speaking of eating well, though, how about the St. Thomas Tommies here? Almost a little over $135 million that they're trying to put together. Their new barn is pretty much relatively set in stone.
Relatively.
Hopefully set to break ground here soon. But from what we can see, it
looks nice.
Beautiful.
So a couple of things to note, right? First of all, they were looking at the old Ford plant property again on the river that was not ideal, although it had the space. So what this arena does is, first of all, $75 million private gift, one of the largest private gifts to a university in United States history. Penny and Lee Anderson Arena. So a $75 million gift. So that gives them over half of the total cost.
I suppose that would give you naming rights, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. And even more importantly, it's on campus, right? So, and I think that was important to the university. So probably part of the price tag, going up as well.
Yeah.
But set to break ground next January. I know they're trying to get it ready for the 2025 season. I think that's a stretch, maybe closer to 2026, but who knows? It's a mixed facility, Noah, so it's both basketball as well as hockey. For that price tag probably makes more sense. And again, St. Thomas's campus, not the most expansive campus, so it probably made sense to do a joint venture like that. But from the rendering side, it looks gorgeous. A lot of limestone, again, keeping with the theme of the St. Thomas campus. But yeah, it would be nice to just be able to, write a check for $75 million. So go ahead and build it, right?
Yeah, it's a beautiful arena. And you look at Augustana, there are opportunities there. Of course, UConn getting a new building, Sacred Heart's new 4,000 seat arena is really pretty. So, good changes in the college hockey world. some that maybe some view that might not be good changes. We'll get to that in a few moments here after, related to one of our NCHC foes. But yeah, you kind of wonder, and we've talked about this, and we'll allude to it again. St. Thomas could end up in the NCHC in the next 5 years. Let's just be honest with that right now. And that's going to relate to our next conversation with Miami. But I mean, we don't say that to just speculate. I mean, there's serious rumblings, and it would make sense financially. The NCHC, I mean, it's all about money in the end, and St. Thomas has shown they have money now.
And more importantly, where they're located.
Yeah, no kidding. And now, speaking of money, let's talk about our St. Cloud State Huskies and their particular building, the Herbrooks National Hockey Center. I thought it would be interesting to maybe do this exercise because, Nick, this is a show topic that you had kind of posed, and I really liked it. And what's interesting, you had posed the question, does the Herbrooks National Hockey Center need to make changes, upgrades, those sorts of things to stay pat? And we talked about the need for upgrades versus a new building, that university in St. Cloud. I don't know how it is as of recent, but as of a couple of years ago, if you want the honest scoop, they're hemorrhaging money left and right. Part of the reason why that football program was cut, attendance was really poor, especially over COVID. Let's not forget, 10 years ago, the average enrollment was 17 to 18,000 people on that campus. When you and I were there, we were at about 11 to 12. During COVID, they were at about 5,500. They would barely fill the Herbrooks National Hockey Center. That kind of gives you an idea of where they were at. So I don't know if they've rebounded a little bit. I from what I hear, I think they have at least a little bit,
Slightly, yeah.
just because of COVID. But with that being said, money is tight here. And we talked about upgrades and those sorts of things. But before we get to that, how about this? Where does the Herbrooks National Hockey Center rank as far as NCHC buildings here? I think
in the bottom three.
Yeah,
I
would tend to agree with you. I think number one might be a bit easy. Could it be Ralph Engelstad?
It probably is. Yeah.
Number two here, I know we have a couple of new buildings. I'm going to go with Baxter Arena in Omaha.
So it's either Baxter or it's going to be Amsoil. One of those two.
I think Baxter looks pretty good just because size, and obviously we saw in the pod, they just a lot of facilities that work the right way.
The capabilities of that arena. I'm surprised they haven't, and they could be a future, depending on the future of the NCAA tournament. They could be a neutral site host for that.
Yeah,
they really could.
And I would be an advocate of it. I think the only thing that hampers them is just the weird arrangement of their benches. Yeah, I think it's the only thing that's odd. Amsoil, I think, would be next. Then I would say Ed Robeson.
Rep Robeson for sure.
Yeah. Then Miami, I would think would be after that. Then Kalamazoo.
Yep, Kalamazoo.
And then St. Cloud.
St. Cloud, and then who are we missing?
Or wait, is that only 7?
That's 7.
North Dakota.
Yep.
Omaha.
Yep.
Duluth.
Yes.
CC.
Yep.
Who are we missing? Why do we not know our teams? My gosh. Denver, Magnus Arena. Denver.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Magnus is kind of an old building. I would say Miami, then Magnus. I would say Magnus would probably be 6. Miami has a nice little barn. Yeah. They just don't fill it. Then Magnus at 6. And then Kalamazoo and the Herb are probably
the bottom 2.
Yeah, right next to each other. I don't know which is which. Kalamazoo is a bit of an old building, too. The Lost and Lunatics like to play that to their advantage. I would say the Herbrooks National Hockey Center at 7, and then maybe Kalamazoo at 8, just because the seating, I think, is still bench seating. Not that the Herbrooks National Hockey Center isn't, but I think Kalamazoo is like all wooden bench seating.
Right.
And it's kind of an older building that has some serious quirks. But again, that goes back to our point, and this is not to rip on, St. Cloud and the Herbrooks National Hockey Center staff. We met them, the ZAM drivers, that sort of thing. They do a great job, and they understand the challenge that they're up against, and that they're fantastic. And this is not taking anything away from them and the work that they do. But the reality of the situation is St. Cloud within the next decade to 15 years is going to have to make a decision and going to have to do something.
Earlier than that.
The question is, what is that? Do the Huskies, yes, I would say you and I agree with the previous question. They need to do something to upgrade continually. If you're that university, do you spend $20 million in upgrades, or do you try to bite the bullet and fundraise and get a new building, which you would have the additional challenge of finding land for that building?
Well, you can just gut the football stadium at this point.
Yeah, true.
And so I have a couple of ideas. So first of all, that decision is not going to take that long. And I'll say why, because it's been more than documented that the the inner workings of Herb Brooks, meaning the compressors are nearing the end of their life.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see a max 5 years, because look at Mariucci. Mariucci they're going to a hybrid rink. They're making their own changes to reduce the width of their rink. St. Cloud has proposed a similar reconfiguration. Once those go down, here's my thing. I think you need to take that as an advantage, because again, it's so old. There's going to be so much work that has to be done. We talked about the water table issues and where they're at.
Yeah.
They're at a point. And mind you, let's not forget, in 2013, the big atrium, renovation, right? The locker rooms, the weight room, have all had some, renovations. In fact, a lot of support for those renovations. They've done work, again, the new scoreboards and the sound speakers. There's still soundproofing that they're trying to do, right? But overall, the fan experience has remained largely the same. And that's where Herb Brooks has really faltered, right? I think you're in a bad spot here if you're at St. Cloud and the university, because you almost have to, I don't want to say a bank, but you kind of have to almost hope that, okay, if these compressors go, you're going to have to almost take this to the state government, just like how they had to get the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center built, right? And propose that, hey, it's not just compressors. We have all this other stuff that needs to be done. Can we get help with this? It's going to be a hard sell, but it's going to have to happen sooner than later. It really does. And I'm not sure, again, with all the work that has to be done, Noah, you're right. I think the big question for the university is, are we really at this point where we have to consider a new building? The problem is you're only about 11 years since that big atrium that was built out in front of it. I don't think you want to let that go to waste.
Right.
But there has to be a lot of work done on the inside of that building to get it up to par. And I don't know. That's a tough one. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think that for sure, I mean, like the new building, you want to kind of sit with the times a little bit. I think about, like, for example, the press box where the media is. Wouldn't you love to, if you're
press box, right?
If you're gonna keep that building, wouldn't you like to expand the walls, put a power band up there, and maybe some additional seating up top, and maybe some suites press boxes up there, similar to what's on the other side? Like, you like to do something with it if you're going to keep that. Like you mentioned, the chillers are getting old. I think the more primary issue is that whatever fluid is used for those chillers
don't make it anymore.
It's discontinued. Yeah,
so dig up the entire thing.
Yeah, so it's an interesting challenge. Obviously, I think the other piece of this too is that who do you feel is going to fork up the money? Obviously, St. Thomas had some great donors here, but you're going to have some incredible marketing schemes and that sort of thing. Like, it's crazy to think we're talking about a top 3 team in college hockey right now, potentially having arena issues or not having a place to play, depending on if something crazy happens in the next 5 years. And that's where I don't really know what the answer is. I like the idea with the football field in the sense that the football field, for those who have been on campus, it's actually right off of where the weight room and center is, and it's actually right off of where the rink is, where the practice rink is. It primarily is the end that it's on. You could definitely do something with that. I mean, that certainly, even if you decided to build essentially a new building and joint it with that, it would take a trek to get into the building. I think that your entrance would have to be on what would that be? The west side, essentially the curvy street coming up. So your parking lot would remain the same, and you'd have to walk essentially up that little hill and make the entrance through where that little alley is, which normally is where which is normally where the visiting teams potentially go in on the backside if you're doing that. Or on the other side, you'd make the entrance where the football field is, where people walk into the football games, and where the far parking lots are next to where the river is. But again, you're limited by the river. I mean, that's the other challenge. So I think that it is possible. Right now, too, is do we just move it back on campus? Do you move it because there's a bunch of those old dorm buildings that are vacant right now? Do you move it more on campus because of the water table issue, right? Yeah, it would be a nightmare as far as parking and getting people in and out of that. No, because you got a parking ramp there that you could utilize. Yeah, but you have to drive. You have to drive into the university, which when you're entering and exiting in there to get to that parking ramp, I mean, you have to drive in there. So I think that would be kind of a nightmare. But what I was going to say is that if you put it somewhere else, football field or otherwise, that gives you a chance where if you really have money as well too, you can remodel the main building with water table issues into something that's serviceable as 2 rinks for the community. That practice rink has been serviceable for that, and the main sheet too. But I mean, maybe you redo the entire floor in there. Does that defeat the purpose of it?
But
maybe. But it's like, it's something to think about, because at some point, like if you build a new rink, that big building is suddenly dormant. Like at some point you'd like to do something with it and use it still. I mean, it's a great facility. So maybe St. John's has an interest in privately fundraising and making that their building. St. Cloud Norsemen, for example, have an opportunity there too.
And maybe that's what you do, right? Is maybe you pull, well, but here's the thing, junior teams move, right?
Yeah, the Norsemen do not have money. They are
but St. John's, maybe, right? And one thing about the St. Thomas concept too, and I'm going to go on a bit of a limb here, because if you remember, AmSoil up in Duluth also is a joint basketball and hockey arena. Do you blow up Howland McCall?
Yeah, which is not anything to shout about, all things considered. Yeah.
And do you get money from St. John's, and because they share the facilities with St. Cloud for hockey and maybe basketball? Do you just and the reason why I'm presenting this, Noah, is that I think we can both realistically agree that a new building is almost out of the question. Almost. I think, and here's why I say that. Yes, there's a lot of work that has to be done, and it would require a lot of, to use a Vancouver Canucks term, it would require more than minor surgery. We'll put it that way.
Could you add a baseball field and put the St. Cloud Rocks in there too?
You could. Just gonna make the roof high enough. But
yikes.
but at the same time, Noah, like the thing is that the university is hemorrhaging student enrollment, which means if you're the state government, why would you be willing to invest money in a building that you may not get a return on investment, right? So you are in the worst of all worst spots. Now, for the NCHC, here's what's funny. St. Cloud in the broadcast program has set the standard for what the NCHC is trying to do. And a bigger reason why, on the second part of our extra ice, of why maybe that could be a positive thing.
And hockey is the pinnacle program on that campus. I mean, it's the D1 program. That and wrestling are the 2 programs that take the cake there. So,
correct. So I don't know. So it's a complicated matter. I think we both agree that there has to be something done, whether it's recruiting, just from the university's competitive stance, for the fan experience. Again, the seats, are way beyond their lifespan. It's way behind, right? And unless something's done relatively soon and relatively in terms of a new building, I mean, you're looking at this point 10-year plan, right? Even if you started doing something now, which I think why we're bringing this up is if you're at a point where it has to start happening. You have to start advocating for something.
They could always play at Mullet Arena. It seems like everybody else does.
Right.
Anyway, with that being said, let's move on to our last topic here, which does relate to the NCHC and all the issues that we've kind of outlined here. A very interesting article. Author is 5B West, coming from letsgodu.com, which of course is primarily Denver University stuff, but they do some really good reporting. There's some really good writers there, and they're commenting on a blog article from View from the Glass, where they interviewed Miami Athletic Director David Saylor. So let's kind of talk about some of the things here. At first, they talked about other conferences like the Summit League and the MAC, the Mid-American Conference. Would those ever become things in addition to hockey? How would the NCHC handle that? But then kind of devolved into some things which some things were okay, I totally get it. And other things were like, that's interesting. So let's start about the things that maybe make sense. He talked about concerns about regional dependence on Minnesota schools, along with North Dakota, for the Frozen Face-Off, which of course is primarily held in St. Paul. And
is it a concern though?
It's interesting. He made this point. At first I was like, okay, whatever, BS. But then he kind of talked about it, and it was interesting. He said, this year's season can sometimes be a doomsday scenario because non-regional schools like Denver, Omaha, CC are suddenly having success, which would theoretically drive away attendance for Frozen Face-Off if they're all successful. Like if it's CC versus Omaha for the championship game. And I kind of thought about it, and I'm like, I think the NCHC would support it enough to where they would have fan interest, but at the same time, like he's not totally off base there. Like it's not.
He's actually 100% right, because for folks who think that, the NCHC generates revenue from other sources. They do, but primarily it's the Frozen Four, which is where they get the majority of their revenue.
And let's be real. You know what is a disaster scenario? What if North Dakota doesn't make the Frozen Face-Off? Mm-hmm. Think about how well North Dakota travels.
Yep.
So like that's a big issue. So yeah, like he kind of has the point there. So I think that's interesting. And you look at Miami on the outside looking in. The conversation that we've had is that Miami and Western would probably be the two teams that would probably travel back to the CCHA, and you would likely welcome in St. Thomas and maybe another club. I would say it would be a Minnesota club. I would think it would be like Augustana, Mankato. It won't be Bemidji because they don't have the money. But there's no other group that I can see, except there was a conversation about potentially adding a team like Arizona State. And for Miami, according to their carrying to the, well, that's good because that's what we're doing. Miami talked about that's a deal breaker for them. They said there's been constant chatter about ASU, and he said, I have no interest in crossing another time zone to play sports. So if the league is continuing to push in that direction, that is going to cause us to think differently about what's going on, which of course people said, ironically, they're going down to Mullet Arena to play the Sun Devils. But okay, obviously that's a one-off trip for them that I'm assuming they budgeted for and planned for and that sort of thing. Yeah. But here's the other thing that I think is interesting about this conversation, and Miami talking about it's a deal breaker in terms of those things. Number one, Nick, let's say you're playing any team in the NCHC. Mm-hmm. You're on the road and you're going to play them. Mm-hmm. How many games and how many weekends do you play that team in their own building?
One
weekend, 2 games. So my thought is, yes, it's an expensive travel thing, but like you're not in a pod down at Mullet Arena. Like you go for one weekend. Now, I'm not an advocate for bringing Arizona State into the NCHC. Do I agree? ASU definitely needs a conference. They're a great hockey team. 100%. I think the NCHC is not their prerogative. Like it's not their vein of what they want to be as a program. We've talked about the expansion west into college hockey and probably UCLA, Oregon, maybe creating their entire conference. I see them as a Big Ten team before I see them as an NCHC team, although I don't know how the parameters of that would work based on the other aspects of their school. I don't see them as an NCHC team just because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense at that point. They're probably CCHA before they're NCHC just because of location.
I don't know about that, but here's what I do. There's one thing we actually agree with. Arizona State, I'm going to actually do a hot take here. They're never going to be in the NCHC, and here's why. This is a pawn move by the NCHC. This is 100 because here's what we think we know. There's been rumblings, as you mentioned, about Miami, and you talk about St. Cloud hemorrhaging money. Miami's worse in terms of their financial situation. And
their program has struggled. There's been question marks about Chris Bergeron, year 4 of a 7-year contract, and they're thinking he might be on the way out.
Yeah. No results, right? So not only that, but it seems to be, I don't know if you want to call it a campaign, but there seems to be a manufactured narrative here to try to allow Miami to back out of its own deal, because you got to remember the conference at any time could buy out a team, and it would cost every team a certain amount of money. But if you throw a narrative out there that says we're going to bring in St. Thomas and Arizona State, and they decide to back out themselves
and see how they react to the conversation.
You know what I'm saying? So I think there is actually I think this is a manufactured type thing just to see where they're at, because it's no secret what the NCHC thinks of Miami in terms of the back. It's no secret. And that's not anything against the players or the coaches or the university itself. It's just a matter of the NCHC feels, let's just be frank, that they're kind of an anchor.
And the other problem with Miami too is, so let's put a comparison. Colorado College was in this spot for a long time.
Yes, they were.
The thing with CC is they're on the western side of the country. Miami is right smack dab in the middle, where you can put them in the CCHA. You could put them, I guess, in the ECAC or Hockey East. You technically could. I don't think those conferences need any more teams, but you're not going to put them in the Big Ten because they haven't had the program success. Or if you do, there better be a formidable plan to make them good, similar to Penn State when they first came in, kind of thing. But that's the thing is, we all know who the first team to go, like you said, will be. And right now it's Miami, because Miami was in this spot where they were a highly successful program right at the turn of when the NCHC became the NCHC, celebrating its 10th anniversary, right? Back in 2012, 2013, I mean, they were 48 seconds away from winning a national championship. Yeah. And then they've devolved into what they are now. And like you said, this is nothing against the program, the players, that sort of thing, but they haven't been good. It's the same conversation we've had about the Arizona Coyotes at the National Hockey League level. Do you build a new arena, or do you realize they haven't been good, and do they need to just move? And I never really thought about it that way, because I agree with your point in the sense that Arizona State is not coming to the NCHC because logistically, with travel and all those things, it just doesn't make sense. Like, no. You're better off bringing St. Thomas or Mankato into the fold, and then saying, oh, well, ASU can go to the CCHA until we figure out what to do with them, kind of thing. Like, that just makes more sense. The travel wouldn't be any better, but the NCHC compared to the CCHA is money laden in comparison, right? So, right. Yep. And ASU would bring a lot of profit, but I think beyond that, I never really thought about it like that, but it is kind of an interesting point where it's like, well, let's see what Miami does. And Western Michigan would be, not to say they would go, because there is a scenario there in which they wouldn't, and St. Thomas jumps in, and that's that. But they could be the unfortunate casualty where they are a team that is good enough to compete, or you keep Western, and like, I guess CC or Omaha is the only other two that you would even get a look at. But I think with Baxter Arena, I think there's no way you want to give that up. And Omaha has been a great school. So there's no other school that I can see moving in that regard.
And here's the thing. If you have Omaha, Denver, CC, you have three teams in the vicinity of each other. So that to me makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I think the bigger ploy here is St. Thomas, right? The NCHC has been eyeing the Twin Cities market for a very, very long time. There's no question about that. There's no question that part of the $135 million that broadcasting is going to be part of that. That's the one thing about the NCHC, and where their revenue is maybe not getting back to what they're putting in, is there's no consistency right now in their broadcast between Duluth, North Dakota, St. Cloud. It's a big difference in terms of how those games are produced. If they can get it on a broadcast, basically a standard effectively, that's going to help the NCHC market their product, be better for the NCHC.TV. But that, again, as we know, a broadcasting technology, that's not cheap.
Yeah.
But with St. Thomas, again, you capture the Twin Cities market, you don't give a damn. And to me, I think you're right. I think it's more of a one-for-one swap right now. I think if you've got St. Thomas, you capture the Twin Cities market and you're competing against the Gophers. I don't really think you need to worry about Western Michigan as much as you do Miami.
And it's interesting. You look at the smart play by CC, right? New jerseys, new head coach, good recruits, new building, right? Things
brand new building. That's gorgeous. Yes.
And the success this year will certainly help them tenfold. To kind of wrap everything up, what program actually needs to be on their toes here, especially if St. Thomas comes into the fold?
Who?
It's St. Cloud.
Yeah.
St. Cloud, needs to do something, because, like you mentioned, the broadcasting program is exceptional. But at the same time, that's between that and the good hockey, that's all they've got. And this is where we brought up the attendance issues against teams like CC. You have to fill that building if you're a Huskies fan. You have to be there, because this is where, if you're the NCHC and you're looking at a program, now granted, St. Cloud has saved themselves by being a perennial contender, right? Yep. But at the same